I'm Patrick V, and you're part of the podcast, Reimagining Leadership, where my focus is on helping people identify the behaviors that will inspire, empower, and compel others to want to follow your lead in any area of your life. I always enjoy having guests on that have a military background, and today is no exception to that. My guest is Becky Halstead. She is a retired Brigadier General from the U.S. Army, and what's also interesting about her background is that she was the second class of women to be enrolled at West Point. I enjoyed our conversation so much as she talked about, I think, so many things that are relevant today in regards to leading and reimagining what it means for us to lead. And it's an episode you're going to want to listen to. So let's get into it. Becky, thank you so much for being on the podcast. I really appreciate it. I think in this environment that we're in right now, you bring so much perspective in terms of your experience. So I would love to provide the opportunity first for you to talk about how did you navigate your career in the armed services? And then how does it relate to what you're doing today?
Well, I kind of love the question about how did I navigate my career, because most of us in the military do not feel like we navigate a thing, right? You know, we take the oath and we go where in my case, the Army, 27 years, where the Army sends me. And we have a saying that home is where the Army sends me. But I did go to West Point, 1977 to 1981. I was in the second class of women to be accepted into the military academy. So that's always kind of a fun factoid for people, because it's not too hard to figure out that, well, that probably wasn't a lot of fun. I mean, first of all, your first year at any academy isn't a lot of fun, male or female, but when you're kind of the new ingredient, let's say, to the formula, it can be kind of exciting. But I grew up in upstate New York, a small country town with no traffic lights, and I played a lot of sports, and I wanted to go to college to be a physical education teacher. And I do tease that when I went to West Point, I was 6 foot tall, and now I'm 5'1.5". But when you grow up in a town with no traffic lights, it's really easy to be a stud or a studette, right? Because if you show up, you're going to be on the team, because there's only so many of us. So I thought I was a pretty good athlete, and that's why I wanted to do that. And I loved coaching. I knew very, very young that I loved being part of a team. I loved leading. I loved figuring out how to work together to make something happen. I loved the win. I loved actually working through the loss. Like, how do I control my attitude, and how do I get the team to put that aside and let's rework it and get to the next one. So my mother was reading that they were letting women go into the academies, and that was in 1976. And she said, "This sounds just like you." And I'm like, "What? Me? There's no other you in the room." Like, what do you mean me? And I don't want to go to an academy. I know nothing about the military. My dad was an IBM engineer and mom, dental hygienist. So I said, "Well, if you help me with the letters of recommendation and the whole process, I'll try." And sure enough, I made a deal, and we tried. And for some reason, I got accepted, which is still unknown to me at this point, because, when I look at my classmates, and when I got to West Point, 4.0 GPAs, graduated first and second in their class. I mean, I was a top 15, but, I came from a town with no traffic lights. There wasn't that many more that graduated. So, but anyhow, so mom helped, and I have very strong family values, very strong community, went off to West Point. And at West Point, I learned, as far as navigating my career, I learned don't quit when it gets hard, right? 2 rules to life. Rule number 1, don't quit. Rule number 2, refer back to rule number 1. The military ended up being perfect for me, because we do have this kind of keep it simple soldier. Our leadership model is be, know, do. It isn't rocket science, but it takes a great deal of discipline to be a strong leader. To choose the harder right, over the easier wrong, and to really maintain your character and your integrity, and to learn every day and improve your competence. So the military worked for me. It was tactical, then operational, then strategic. So I loved soldiering. I loved being a soldier, and I loved leading soldiers. I loved the whole human dimension. I was a logistician, so I get a lot of opportunities to speak to the supply chain management side of the world now, about leading in that arena, which you can imagine right now is very chaotic when you hear all about, the distribution of everything from toilet paper to vaccines, right?
Flour.
So
Yeah.
yeah,
Seriously.
so it's so my 27 years after I graduated in 1981, I became a logistician, and then I served 27 years in the military, moved 18 times, served in Afghanistan and Iraq. A lot of people say, "Oh, what was that like to be a woman leading a military in those countries?" And I'm like, "Well, they didn't have any women in their military, but there was always an expectation of respect, and I always received respect." Sometimes I tease a little bit and say, sometimes I felt like our coalition forces were more respectful than some of the men on my own side, right? On the same team, because it's taken our military a long time to fully integrate women into all branches, all services, all branches, all subject matter skills. And so I was certainly, as I navigated through my military career, I made the best choices I thought for me based on my DNA, my strengths, and I wouldn't change very much of that. It worked out really well, but I also saw the need that we need to open everything to women. If women can do just as well or better, then they ought to have the same opportunity. For me, it's always been about standards, right? So if I meet the standard, don't exclude me just because I'm a woman. So that was probably one of the hardest parts of navigating through the military. There sometimes wasn't the same opportunity for a logistician, supply chain manager, or for a woman in that course. But I think having to navigate makes it part of the challenge, right? Makes it part of the fun, makes it part of the, gosh darn it, we did that. We were innovative and we did that and we were successful, and help others be that way, right? I do a lot of coaching now for other people coming into the military, men and women. Long answer.
Yeah, no, it's interesting though. The things that I was thinking about as you were telling that story is that it seems as though your need for team was satisfied in the environment you were in, that you were talking about before you went into West Point. But also what I hear and what's interesting with West Point, now they talk about grit, and you demonstrated that, right? I think through your own perseverance.
Right. The grit factor is something that a lot of people talk about. Another person you might want to get on here sometime is Shannon Polson. She's written the book, The Grit Factor. And so there's several, I actually don't know how many women are involved with it, but there's a lot of women from a lot of industries and military service that were part of her book. And then we were part of a NBC series on TV. But I love the way she has kind of captured what is grit, and it's a little bit different in all of us. And, at the end of the day, to me, it's just a real strong determination to realize your full potential, to help others realize their full potential, to not just be successful, but to be successful and then to be significant, to really understand the value of your life and that you have purpose. Because I do believe there's a big difference, because there's a lot of people out there who are very successful, but they're willing to just enjoy their success for themselves and they don't share it. And that's just beyond me. My dad taught us a long time ago that, because I wasn't sure about this whole concept of making money. You don't make a lot of money in the military, and but you don't do poorly. Don't get me wrong. You have benefits and everything else, but it's not like you join the military to become rich, right? In terms of money, you join the military to become rich inside because you have such a purpose. When we leave the military or we retire from the military, we have new opportunities that now bring on a different financial opportunity. And my dad always said, don't apologize for being excellent. Don't apologize for making more money than maybe something that makes you feel comfortable, because the more you make, the more you can give.
Yeah.
And I love that.
It's very interesting too, when you talk about, I would say, happiness versus purpose, and they're not the same thing. And actually, I'll be getting on a webinar shortly after this call to talk about specifically that in research that's been done, when they looked at people that were happy, the happiness came from stuff that you received, and purpose and meaning was what you did for others. And what they found was those that were about others tended to rate themselves as happier.
Totally. So the way I equate that is joy. So you hardly ever hear me say, I'm happy. Happy is just not a word I use. And joy to me is definitely in the same bucket as purpose. So I tell people that the greatest joy of leading is leaving a legacy. So that's about others, right? That's about teach, coach, mentor others.
Yeah.
And then when you see them do wonderful things, maybe even, surpass you, right? Like I always talk about this one gentleman that I grew up in the Army with. And then it just happened that in Iraq, he was one of my brigade commanders. So I was a general, he was a colonel. But we'd kind of grown up as peers, really. But it just happened that was the timing of things. And he was just a little bit younger than me. But now, always so much respect, so much admiration for each other, not just for him, for me, because I was the general. And then after I retired, he made general. And I was like, I couldn't be happier if I was his mother, right? And then he made 2 stars. Well, he ended up making 4 stars. And he runs all the logistics for the Army. And now he's pretty famous because he is now the 4-star general, Gus Perna, that they just chose to be the one that navigates and does the logistics with the vaccine once it's out there and everything else. So I go like, wow, like that's like, that's like my brother, right? And but so it's joy, and I'm very faith-based. That's very personal. I share it when I speak on leadership because it is part of who I am. It's part of my DNA. It's part of what I rely on. And I had a Sunday school teacher once say, and you like acronyms, I like acronyms, the acronym JOY. Jesus first, others second, yourself next. And isn't that like the perfect model, right?
Yeah.
So,
Becky, as you were talking about the challenges, I have found in my experience when I interview people that have been successful in a wide range of areas, that it often comes down to, when we talk about, there are challenges that they've had to deal with at some point that really have helped shape who they've become. And I would say it's really our past is our power. And I'm wondering, from your own experience, as you look back, what is probably one of those challenges that you look at now and think, this really helped define or shape who I've become?
Well, it's always hard for me to choose, right? So I do this one day, I'll call it kind of a workshop on your personal leadership, right? So what is your personal leadership and how did you get there? Well, it's a journey. And so it happens over time. And I tell people, put above the line those things that powerfully impacted you. It still could have been a challenge, but it was a positive challenge. And those things below the line that were what you would put as a kind of a downer or a negative challenge, and how those shaped you.
I love that. Yeah.
Because, right? So it's kind of so then I usually put like 6 to 8 things on that chart, and then I have other people do it, and then everybody shares a story. So the nice thing about that is everybody starts on the team, gets to know each other. So if I think about my chart, my mental chart, so below the line, the first, probably most significant event in my life that truly has shaped my path was, I told you I was very much into sports, and I wanted to be a physical education teacher. Well, the reason why was because I absolutely loved spending time in the gym. I played 9 varsity sports in high school. Again, you can be on 9 varsity teams when you come from a town with no traffic lights. So, but when you come from a small town, you have only 2 or 3 coaches. So I had the same coach for basketball as I did softball, and for several years. In my junior year, my basketball coach, Carol Lavina, she also loved parachuting, and she was doing a 12-person parachute jump. And when they all break away from the formation, someone broke away, pulled their chute too early, came up before she even could pull her chute, knocked her unconscious. And so she never did pull her chute, and she died. Went through the top of her fiance's parachute. Might have been boyfriend, fiance, I'm not sure. So I was a young, as a junior in high school, but very, very significant traumatic event. For me, it turned my light switch off. I didn't even want to live, right? I just didn't want to function. I didn't want to go to school. I didn't want to go to college. But because I came from a small community, those teachers wrapped their arms around me, again, team, right? Yeah. And they go like, you'd be really letting your coach down if she could see how you're responding to this. She would expect you to be a leader in this group, pull the rest of the kids together and say, let's keep winning. We were in softball at the time. let's keep winning. Let's do this. So we started wearing black ribbons on our arms and things like that. Well, I had already applied to West Point, and I think it was either 11 or 12 days before her death. She wrote a letter of recommendation for me. And when I went to the senator's office in New York for my interview, he said, "Oh, you're from that town where a high school teacher was killed." And I said, "Yes, she was killed parachuting." As a matter of fact, there should be a letter of recommendation in my file. I don't know how many days later, a week, 2 weeks later, his office sent me my entire packet. And in there was her handwritten, at that time, because, we didn't have computers then, right? It was typewriters or handwriting. It was a handwritten letter of her letter of recommendation for me to go to West Point. And so many things I learned about that. Like, number one, she was saying things about me that I didn't even know she felt or that she saw, right? She was seeing my potential. So immediately as a young person, you go, how many people, I need to see the potential in other people, right? And so then when I read that letter, the light switch went back on. And she also in the letter said, I'm having the opportunity to do things that weren't even dreamt of for her in her time. She's, probably about 8 to 10 years older than me. And so every decade, more opportunity arises. So what are we going to do with that, right? And how are we going to embrace that and help others embrace that? So anyhow, but part of that was then I developed a very strong relationship with her mother, who was just as tough as she was. My goodness, I played golf with her into her 80s, and she gave me not one benefit. Like if I went into the water, she'd come over, lay her golf club down, and I stayed in touch with her forever. And when I wrote my book on leadership, in my book, I don't name people, right? Like that's not the type of book I write. It's about leadership principles, things I learned, stories from my military career. So I don't put any names in the book, but I want to talk about my coach because she had such a powerful impact on me for leading myself, for leading others to be part of a team. And when I truly felt the full impact of that was almost 30 years later in Iraq. In Iraq, when I would go to the hospital and I would visit my wounded soldiers, and they would already be in that kind of PTS, that post-traumatic stress of, why did my buddy die and I live? Why? And I can remember the first time I had that conversation, it was the experience of having gone through that as a teenager, asking why of my coach, and not wanting to go on myself, that I could understand what my soldier was going through. And I can remember saying, none of us will ever know why, ever. But what I do know is this: live your life honoring that person you thought so much of. Honor them by living your life with the way they saw you as a friend or as a subordinate or as a peer. Live out your full potential. And who would know that would happen, right? That was maybe the whole purpose for me of that situation, to learn that. And I'm not gonna lie to you, there were a lot of peaks and valleys, but when you can go back now and reflect over all that time, that's the goodness that you see out of such a tragic event. And we both know there's so many people that are suffering from isolation and, losing loved ones who they can't even hold their hand, and they can't go to they can't have a funeral. So we can be such a voice of encouragement, and it doesn't matter when that event happened to us. We just have to be able to articulate it so we can help people.
Two things that I think about when I hear that is, one is empathy, is really this strong demonstration of empathy there is so apparent. But when I think about the letter that you got to see, these things that were said about you, it reminds me of the responsibility I think that we have in terms of what we set for expectations for others, how powerful that is, that if we don't expect much of other people, then oftentimes they will deliver not much. But the opposite is also true, that if we hold people to higher standards, I think of, you can do this, you're better than this, then I think there's a drive that we have inside of us. And I will jokingly say, when I speak, that I talk about the Pygmalion effect, that I will say, there were teachers that I had that didn't expect a lot from me, and there were others that expected a great deal from me. And I didn't seem to disappoint on either side of that.
Yeah, right.
But the power that has, that we have over other people.
Yeah. And it also taught me the power of a handwritten note, the power of letting people know how you feel. Like, don't wait, right? And throughout my entire career, I mean, I probably was known as someone who wrote a lot of notes and a lot of letters, because what was very apparent to me is that there are a lot of people who they're not blessed with having a wonderful family like I had, right? Like, and my parents are still living. They're in their 80s. They're vibrant. They're still big cheerleaders. I mean, if they could put an email with feedback when I go to speak, or somebody read my book that's on the refrigerator with a gold star, and I'm 61 years old. So, but not everybody had that joy. So I also always looked in my organization. I would look for those who maybe were sitting alone or walking alone, or falling out of a run in the morning. Why are they falling out? It isn't probably because they're not in shape. It's probably something that's up here in the heart that's causing them to feel defeated or whatever. And and I was never a yeller and a screamer, and so you would see sometimes leaders yelling and screaming at people to get back in formation. I'd be like, you know what? I never ran faster because someone yelled at me. So instead, even though as a leader, the expectation is kind of that the leader's up front when you're doing all the running, I started out up front, and then I'd fall back to the wayside, and I'd talk to people, and I'd be like, hey, can you believe they pay us to do this? And then I'd go back to the back, and I'd run. But I'd always look for the people that fell out, because I wanted to know why. And you found out so many interesting things about people, and just simple things like sending Christmas cards when, I had a whole battalion deployed to Kosovo when I was stationed at Fort Drum. And I could not be in Kosovo with them because it was just one of my many units. But I thought, well, but I can reach out to them. So I did a Christmas card to every soldier. And then I put like a red, white, and blue taffy candy in the envelope. And I admit, I had my driver and my secretary help me lick all those envelopes and, get them all boxed up. But I signed all of them and then got the candy, put it in there. Now, I don't know, I can't remember how many, it was about 400. And it's not like I got 400 responses going, thank you, ma'am, whatever. I probably got like 4 responses, but one response is what counted. This young kid sent me a note and he said, it's the only Christmas card I received. So it kind of makes you emotional, because like how sad that is. But then on the other hand, you go, I'm so glad I sent 400, even though, maybe only one was as powerful. But so you don't do it to get 400 thank yous. You do it because your heart, your mind, which I believe that's what leadership is when your heart and your mind are it's fusion of those two things. Hey, that one kid, that was worth 4,000 cards.
It's interesting when you tell that story, I think about behaviors and research that I look at in terms of what are the behaviors that create leaders. And one of the things that often comes up is around belongingness. The research that's out there on belongingness, we're wired for connection. And to me, I think as leaders, it's our responsibility to bring people inside the group and not make them feel isolated. That when we do that people want to do more. They're inspired to do that when they feel like you've made them feel part of what's going on, as opposed to you're on the outside.
Yeah, totally. So when I speak on leadership, I have one slide that I like to show, and it's I'm on the border of Syria, and I'm out there talking to some of my soldiers that were at one of the bases. But I'm also talking to the leaders who were responsible for the physical security of that base, right? And the title is very simple. It says, circulate, communicate, and connect. I mean, that's the whole purpose of the communication, right? And I tease and I say, I'm 5'1.5", and of course, when soldiers stand in front of you, they stand at attention and they look straight out, which means they're usually looking straight over my head. So I'd say, no, look down here, look me in the eye, because I would tell them that when I look you in the eye, I can see your soul, right? I can feel your soul, and I want to connect, and I can also tell, are you nervous? Are you confident? Are you scared? All those things, But that is the whole purpose of communication, is to connect.
And when you're with your eyes, you're listening with a sense of really reading. It's an awareness of others that certainly you speak to.
It is. You shake somebody's hand. Is it cold? Is it sweaty? Whatever. And I was known as the colonel or the general that hugged too, because I'm like, I'm just going to do it. When we left Iraq in 2006, so I had 30,000 people in my command, and we operated out of 55 different bases, and we did all the logistics for Iraq. So there's no way I could go to all 55 bases and say goodbye to everybody and thank everybody, right? It's just an impossibility. But where I could go, I did. And when I could, I did. You know, I don't even know how many that was, but we did send a lot of people home right out of the base where I lived, which was Balad. And I told my sergeant major, you know, I don't care what time of night it is, what time of day it is. If we're available, we're going to go out onto the tarmac and we're going to say thank you and put their tired butts in a seat on a plane and let them go home. And so there's a couple of pictures of me kind of like embracing them. And we got all of our gear on. So let me tell you what, when you slap about 300 people on the back with that IBA, it's like your hand's bruised by the end of the day, you know. But anyhow, so embrace, right? Embrace and encourage and thank people. Well, I went back to my headquarters, and a young major who had been a little bit of a thorn in my side, you know, felt like he was there illegally, and, you know, oh my gosh, it was just crazy. But, you know, he stayed the whole year. We made him work, and so he wasn't real happy about it. But, you know, we have disgruntled people sometimes in our organizations. So he came to me and he approached me and he said, you know, I know you're going out and you're thanking everybody before you put them on the plane. He goes, how do you know that all of them deserve a thank you? Of course, if you haven't ever read the book 3 Seconds, you need to read it, because the whole thesis is if we all pause for 3 seconds, we'll be a lot happier with what we say. My mother gave it to me, by the way.
I love
That's telling. That's telling. So anyhow, so I was practicing the 3-second rule because inside my head I'm going, you are exactly the person I would have a hard time saying thank you to,
yeah.
right? But I know that I know that you have to give credit where credit is due, and where you need to really deliver consequences, you deliver consequences. And so I kind of paused and I said, look, I don't know every individual that I said thank you to and slapped them on the back and shook their hand and put them on the plane. There's no way. I don't know every single one of them. I don't know if they've been a great performer, a good performer. I don't know. But here's what I do know. I am thanking them for their service. They left their families, their homes. They volunteered to be in this military, and they were gone for a year in combat. That alone deserves a thank you. Thank you for your service. He didn't say anything else, which I'm so glad he didn't say anything else. But so, you don't want to be rewarding and awarding and recognizing people for things that's inflated, because then it doesn't have meaning. But, you know, a simple thank you, we can pretty much find is appropriate for almost everybody, right?
Yeah.
So.
And that was, and you thank them for really the service, which they did do. It wasn't, you know, telling everybody you did the best. It was
right.
It was sincere in that regard.
Yeah, no, right. It was very clear that was for their service. That was for leaving their families,
right,
being dedicated to their country, coming into combat. And now thank you for that. Put your tired butt in that seat and go back home and do great things. Yeah. Because, you know, when you do an award like a Legion of Merit or Bronze Star or any of those things, there has to be credibility to that. That has to be research. You need to know that if I'm coming and putting a Bronze Star on your uniform, you can be sure that my signature means that I agree that you earned it.
As we've been having this conversation, Becky, I had STEADFAST up.
Oh.
and I've been looking at the acronym. And as you've been going through telling your stories and examples, you've hit on just about every one of these, from selfless, trust, and courage, attitude, discipline, family, friends, and faith, accountability, standard setter, and teamwork. As we think about that from a standpoint of the environment that we're in today, STEADFAST obviously is very important to you. Is there one on there that you think is most important at this point?
Absolutely. For me, the most important one is the D, discipline. And the reason why is because it takes a great deal of discipline to choose the harder right over the easier wrong. It takes a great deal of discipline to make sure you're constantly thinking and deliberately thinking, are my priorities in the right place? You know, some days your family comes first, some days your job comes first, right? I mean, look at what's going on today, right? People who are first responders that are in the hospitals, and they're sleeping in a tent or sleeping at a hotel so they don't, you know, infect their families. They're putting kind of their job and their family first, but that their job is first. They're trying to save lives, and they're taking care of their family by not being there and infecting them. Now, a family member might think, no, you're not putting me first, you're putting your job first because you're not home. Eventually they mature and understand, no, I really was putting you first because my job's really important, because it's about people, it's about healing. But so the D in discipline, because it's for the most simple things, and it's for the most profound, right? Simple, like being on time for a meeting, getting your work done on time, helping a peer when, you know, it's very inconvenient, because it's never convenient when somebody wants help, right?
Right.
Right.
And that's about being for others, right? That's back to that
Others.
meaning, right? It's the purpose of, it's not about ourselves. When we're about other people, there really is much more value to it.
Yeah, much more value.
You also have a book that I will tell you, I would love to have an opportunity now to go back and read that book and have you on again to really talk about that. But just so I can have this in the show notes, I'd love for you to tell the audience, what is the book? Where can they get it?
So it's 24/7. I don't know if it shows up backwards for you, but it's 24/7. The first person you must lead is you.
Love it.
Put dog tags on it, because dog tags are very important to us in the military. We put those over our head and neck every day, and we commit ourselves to being the best soldier that we can be, right? And the best leader we can be for those that we lead. It has nothing to do with rank. It has to do with service. And I put a star in the O and U because I believe everybody out there has star potential. A lot of people think it's because I was a general, but that's kind of the catch, right? Like a good country western song, you know, you want to catch. But everybody has star potential, and that's part of our leadership responsibility. So it is 30 leadership principles, and it's a quick read, it's a fast read. It's mostly storytelling. You know, I give a principle and I tell stories as to how I either lived that out successfully or failed. It's also about failure. Again, no names in it, because it wasn't about naming a bad boss or any of that. It was about situations from being young, you know, being a young lieutenant, to being a general, and where I got it right and where I got it wrong. And you know, it seems I've gotten a lot of great feedback from people just on how it's helped them. It's helped them to lead themselves better. And the reason why I say first person you must lead is you is because sometimes we get caught up in the, you know, oh, I'm a leader, I'm in a leadership position, I get to tell everybody what to do, but I don't have to follow the rules myself. Right. And I could not agree with that at all. You know, and when I first started out in the Army, you always had that rank has its privileges. So you always wanted to get to the next rank. And then as I kind of grew up, I went, rank has its privileges. I hate that saying. I think it should have been rank has its responsibilities. And the higher you go, the more selfless you better be. But yeah, that's the book. It's on my website, BeckyHalstead.com. Pretty easy. Keep it simple, soldier.
And I'll have that in the show notes. And that's our hook to get you on the show again, to be able to talk about the book.
I'll be happy to do it again.
I'm looking forward to reading that. And I really appreciate your time and certainly your service to our country.
Thank you so much. I love your questions, and now I'm going to go back and try to catch up on all your podcasts.
Thank you. Becky's story, her background is so inspiring, and I know that if you listen to the things that she had to say, there's something that you can take away and apply it in your own life in terms of how you behave and how you lead those around you. And I am so looking forward to having her on again to discuss her book, 24/7, The First Person You Must Lead Is You. I'm sure it's going to be phenomenal, and I can't wait to finish reading it. If you know somebody that would benefit from listening to this episode, I would ask that you forward it on to them. If you haven't subscribed, please subscribe to the podcast, and it would mean the world to me, as always, if you would leave a rating or a comment on this or any other episode, because that's how this message continues to get out there about reimagining leadership. And boy, do we need it more than ever today. So until our next episode, I hope you're able to go out there and rise above your best. Peace.